Is there reason for optimism? Frankly, I've not always been so sure. I had an underlying note of pessimism even in my early life. As a youth, I picked up a guitar and wrote several songs. One of them, a piece of it went like this. What have I to be thankful for? I'm lost and I'm lonely and I haven't a single thing. The song wasn't very popular, even among my friends. As I reached adulthood, I tried out several jobs before I finally settled into one that really worked for me. I became a tester of computer-based systems. I discovered I had a knack for finding things that could go wrong. Finally, I had found a career that fit what I saw as my natural inclination toward pessimism. I became optimistic about being pessimistic. Fast forward to 2005. I had a nearly fatal heart attack. I was lucky, and I survived it, even though part of my heart did not. It became clear that I needed to make some drastic changes in my life. Food, exercise, sleep, relaxation. I made those changes, and it worked. But changing so much in my life was really, really hard. And it wasn't easy to stick to it, even after I thought I had finally made the changes. I decided that maybe I should become a coach to help other people do what I did. And while training to become a coach, I discovered a few things about optimism. For a long time, psychology had focused on what can go wrong with people. But starting in the 1990s, a turn began to take place. And there was a new focus on how people get through difficult things and make very difficult changes in their lives. How do they survive and even flourish? It turns out that there are many ways for us to cope and move forward. Often they tap into a natural human optimism. And a coach's role sometimes is to help clients to surface that optimism and to take advantage of it in order to make the changes that they want. I'll name 3 ways that they often do this. First, many coaches focus on strengths rather than weaknesses. They have tools that identify a client's strengths and help the client to figure out how to use those particular strengths, their own, to approach the particular challenge that they're trying to deal with. Second, they utilize change models that make clear what's happening and what strategies might work at particular stages in the client's process. Dr. James Prochaska offers one such model. Prochaska also pointed out, after a lot of study, that many, many people start to make a change and fail. But then, after several times of trying, they succeed. Third, coaches guide a client through a particular process. Here's one that I often used. First, identify the goal. Then get in touch with why that goal really matters to you. Identify what's getting in the way. Then identify a few very tiny, very small steps that are doable, that move in the right direction. Now arrange your life to help yourself be successful in taking those steps. Try it out, then come back and review. Rinse, wash, do it again. Now, I'm no longer a coach, at least not in any official way, but you might have noticed that I bring some of those ways of tapping into optimism into my work as children and youth coordinator in this church. I find that they really mesh with my Unitarian Universalist faith and my work in the church. One of the things I really love about Unitarian Universalism is that it's relatively positive about people, about me and about you and about the people around us. We see human beings as flawed in many ways, yes, but we see ourselves and one another as having agency and opportunity to improve ourselves and to improve the conditions in which we live. We don't need to wait for heaven to arrive. We can influence what happens right here, right now. It may take time to take effect. It may be difficult, really difficult, but we have influence. And it turns out that Unitarian Universalists are aware that that influence can be enhanced if we work on it in community. We also happen to be aware that community is not always perfect. As much as we praise it and seek it, we know that community can be flawed. But we Unitarian Universalists have a process. I would call it a sacred process of covenanting, of making commitments to one another, just as we did this morning when we installed our religious education team. We make commitments about how we will be together and how we will be in the world together. Now, covenants are not always perfect, and we often break them. Covenants are human products, and they must be lived into by human beings. But built into our covenants, sometimes explicitly, sometimes not so much, is a process of noticing when covenant is flawed or when we've broken our commitments. In youth circles, we often call that process of noticing ouch and oops. Ouch, what just happened hurt. Oops, I just did something that was harmful. Then we can take action to heal our relationships by re-covenanting. We begin again in love. As children and youth coordinator, I get to work with our children and youth week after week. And let me tell you, each one is precious. Each one is on their own journey. And for me, each of them, when each child is born, there's another opportunity. There's another affirmation. There's more possibility. Some people say our children are our future. I say no, They are our present, though we might end up being their past. I'm speaking to adults here. Each child is one of us. They belong among us, and we belong among them. Because fundamental change often takes time, not just years, but whole generations, the influence that we have is enhanced even more if we are in a community in which a whole generation belongs with all generations. A community that wholeheartedly includes all. We begin again and again as individuals and as communities. Again and again, generation to generation. As a flower unfolds and shines its new particular beauty in a world that might have gone drab, so does each child unfold and shine. So does each person, each community, each generation. So is there reason for optimism? I say yes. I know this rose will open. So may it be. Let's turn to hymn number 396.
Sing it through 3 times.
And we'll sing it through 3 times. I know this rose will open.
As I was reading, singing the lyrics of this song, I found myself switching the lyrics, I'll be honest, to I know my fear will open, and I know my wings will burn away. That is the place of pain I felt this week and still sits with me. I know we don't all have the same point of view about most things. Most things. And so I acknowledge that as I speak. But even if you have the personality of an optimist, I think a lot of folks had a deep gut punch this week. I know I did, and I am still healing from it. As a survivor of rape, I am still healing from this. I have to tell you that. I would be less than authentic not to acknowledge that my heart hurts. And it's been a tough week. So, optimism. What the heck is that? Really? You know, social scientists study lots of things. And I have to admit, although I am a licensed marriage family therapist and I took psychology classes up the wazoo, in my undergraduate years, I took social psychology and got a D. I got a D largely because I argued with the professor repeatedly about the idea of not telling people what you were doing when you were testing them. I found that very difficult to deal with. While she spoke with pride about that, I found that a little challenging. You're not telling people that you're giving them a placebo or that you're telling them a lie or whatever. I just found it hard. But a lot of social psychology continues on and does good work, and they have studied, some social psychologists, what is optimism? What is it really? And what most of them have concluded, at least those who have done research studies and studies that, I don't necessarily like how they do them, but okay. They researched and decided, have come up with the idea that it's an approach to life that basically, I'm being very simplistic in this, basically says, as you go forward in life, you approach life as, it's going to be fine. It's going to be good. whether it's your personal life or things going on in your church community or beyond these walls, things will turn out for a variety of different reasons. Maybe because of self-efficacy, maybe because of luck, maybe because other people will intervene and make it good. But basically, it's an approach to life that things will turn out well for you or your community. And some social psychologists have researched the difference between optimism and hope. Because a lot of people, even in the dictionary, will kind of make it look like, well, aren't they the same thing? No, they're not. Are you with me on this? They're not the same thing. They're not. And the thing that makes hope different is actually a part of optimism, which is the business of self-efficacy. That's part of the difference. That we can look at the possibility of something happening in the future and see that there are many different possible outcomes, and that we can make a difference by our words and deeds. That is hope. In a nutshell, that is the difference between hope and optimism, which says, yeah, maybe these different causes, but it's going to turn out good. If you're hopeful, but not an optimistic person necessarily, you might look at the broad spectrum of possibility and probability. Yeah, it's possible that there'll be a good outcome, the one I want, but it may be more or less probable, more or less likely to happen, and I'm going to look at what I can do myself and in community to realize what I'm trying to realize, what I'm hoping will occur. I don't leave it to chance. I don't leave it to luck. I don't leave it to other people. I don't leave it to politicians. I don't leave it. I know that there's something I can do. And often people look at our work and say, well, I'm fill in the blank, too something, too tired, too busy, too old, too young, too DOO something. So I can't do anything. But that's really on us to change. We need to look at who we each are and what we can each do to affect the outcomes in life that we seek to effect. Those of you who were here my first sermon a few weeks ago know that I talked about the external outcomes as being different from what's in your heart, of that place that's there all the time, like the sun behind the clouds sometimes, but you know it's there. Hope is a reservoir in your heart. It's a reservoir in your being. We can turn to that place within us, and we take steps to realize that hope in the world. It doesn't mean absolutely we'll get the outcomes we wish for personally, as a small community, a religious community, as a society. It doesn't mean that, but it means we understand our common humanity, a part of which is that we can make a difference. So it's on us to find the ways, whether it's making phone calls or writing letters or being on the street with signs or being a mentor or going to a young person's baseball game and supporting them, or their graduation and supporting them, even if they're not your family. Maybe children here will be graduating or in games or doing something out in the world, and we can all be a part of that. We can all support that for a positive outcome and for a positive attitude. So what some researchers have said is that, as a result of their studies, is that we can actually become more both hopeful and optimistic if we do that visualization that I had you go through. How many of you actually did the visualization, more or less? Right, okay, good. So what they did in different studies, 8-week studies where people did that visualization a couple times a week, and 2-week studies where they did it every day of the week, and different variations on that, is that at the end of that short-term period, the people who did the visualization experienced themselves as happier, a little more open, a little more positive, seeing the possibilities a little more clearly than they had before they did that exercise, that visualization. And in long-term studies, what they have found is that people who have practiced this kind of visualization and other activities to support themselves in their own sense of efficacy in the world are actually more successful by their own standards over time. So I invite us to do a couple things. One is to, in spite of sometimes some really hard things in the world, extraordinarily painful things in the world, to be open to our efficacy and wanting to nurture it in ourselves and one another. Whether it means doing visualizations, or meeting in small group ministry, or going out and helping people to go out and vote with understanding of the issues that are at stake. Whatever steps make sense, my hope for you is that you let a smidgen of optimism into your hearts, because it isn't all about us and what we do, but it is a chunk. Let a smidgen of optimism into your hearts and minds, and let your hope flourish. Whatever it takes to let your hope flourish, kindled by this place within your heart and spirit, and then put into action with your words and deeds. Does that make sense? Because, you know, again, social psychologists, when I was a freshman in college, I had a job at Downstate Medical Center. And my job was to listen to tape recordings of obese women who were interviewed about their eating habits. And what I had to do was listen, and I had a script. Somebody had put together what they said, so I knew what they were going to be saying. And I had to mark down their pauses, how long were the times between they spoke, depending on the question. And that's fine, and I'm sure they got something out of that study, but I tell you, I ended up feeling like they were studying me and my appetite, because I got so hungry listening to this stuff. So, you know, social psychology is interesting. It affords us some interesting conclusions. I'm still thinking about it. I actually get hungry when I think about that study. Never mind. But take it from our Unitarian Universalist tradition. All are worthy, that we have efficacy, that we have what we need to do the good in the world we can envision. So let yourself, even if the storm seems absolutely like you can't get through it, know that you can. With one another, you can get through it and do the good you dare to dream. So may it be, and amen.